everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. Now, I just finished off the old Marvel comics that take place before Episode 6. Actually, there's one more, but I'm going to do that later. Essentially, I just got a bunch of comics, so I'm going to go through them. I don't remember exactly what I know I discussed the Shira Bree arc. Issue 64 sucks, and I'm not going to discuss it further. Issue 65, I honestly don't remember, but they beat a fat guy, apparently. This is what I wrote. Issue 66, Water Bandits. They defeated it's a generic adventure, and stuff happens, and Luke wins in the end. It's fine though. Star Wars Annual number 2. The first annual, I think, was the Skywalker's Winged Creatures. This one's just basically a Han adventure. The characters go to this planet, they find a statue of Han. They're like, what the heck? And it turns out that Han did some stuff for them in the past, and so they honor him by leaving a statue. It's just a way to have Han in the comic book, because he's frozen in carbonite, so you can't really have Han around, but everybody misses Han, so this little comic to have him included, because since it's a flashback, it's okay. But that's all it basically is. But it's fun. We also have issue 67. We have the bounty hunters from episode 5 that are against our heroes, and then also Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2 go underneath this base that they're at, underground, and they find this green negative villain, like he's made from negative emotions, I guess, and he does stuff, and he gets beat by the end. It's kind of weird, but it takes place here, so we're including it. It's not necessarily not canon, it's just weird. Issue 68, however, we get Mandalore, which is, I think probably the first time we saw Mandalore. Now, there is a contradiction in this issue. It's issue 68 and 69 where they're, and 70 where they're on Mandalore. But, it's issue 68 and 69 are on Mandalore. But there's a contradiction because Fen Shaisa, who is the Mandalore of current day Mandalorians, or at least of the Rebellion era, says that he fought with Boba Fett in the Clone Wars, which Boba Fett was 10 years old. Now, of course, back in the day, Lucas kept changing his mind about when the Clone Wars actually took place. But back then, it was like, maybe like only 10 years ago. So Boba would be like a young buck, a young guy. And it doesn't really work. And I think the only patchwork they made is that he actually fought beside a clone trooper and got them confused. But wait, how would Fen Shaisa... Because doesn't nobody know that Boba Fett is a thing until he comes onto the scene? So how would anybody know? Why would he confuse that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. You kind of just ignore that little backstory he gives, I guess. All these comics are S-canon, so you pick and choose, basically. So I would just ignore that little comment about Boba Fett. Basically, he just looks a lot like Boba Fett because he's a Mandalorian, so he has similar armor. That's it. He never met Boba Fett. We're ignoring that. Or if they did, it was not the way that was described in this book. But basically, that is one of the other contradictions of the EU. But again, this was very early on. This is like the 80s. And it's also completely and utterly George's fault for giving a false time frame of when all this went down. So any inconsistencies like that are basically on George, not on the EU writers. Issue 70 is a flashback for issues 71 and 72, because we get introduced to this whole crew and this Zeltron named Danny, who has the crush on for Luke, and they show up in issues 71 and 72 with our heroes, and stuff goes down. In issue 73, it's still present day, but the Zeltron from these previous issues is still hanging out with the main characters, and she gets in shenanigans. It's okay. But this is where we are officially introduced to Zeltrons. In fact, they're not really included in very much. They're basically just very sexual beings, I guess. But, you know, they appear in these comics. They're mentioned here and there throughout the different pieces of the expanded universe, but the only other time I can think of like a big role for Zeltron, of course, would be in the Legacy comics with Cade Skywalker, where we get Delilah Blue, who's probably the best Zeltron because she gets the most development, but also Delilah way better than Talon. Just a little sidetrack there. But that's that. Issues 74 to 75 or 76 is this water planet, like just covered in water, and our heroes are on there because they keep getting sidetracked from their main mission, which is to save Han Solo. But, you know, they can't actually do that story because episode 6 is going to do that story, and they knew that, so they're kind of constrained to what they could do. But they had to make comics before the movie came out, so they just kept making a bunch of side adventures, a bunch of side quests leading up to that main quest in the video game. You know, like they weren't allowed to go there yet, so they just did the other parts of the game first, basically. I do like the ending to this arc, I guess, with Admiral Tower, because he bombs the entire planet. And Vader's pissed because he learns that Luke was on there, and so he has Admiral Towers executed, because of course he wants Luke to be okay, which I thought was pretty cool. Issue 77 is an adventure. They go to this place. There's a bunch of more Zeltrons, and they're trying to do this thing, and it's fine. Issue 78. Wedge tells a story about how he escaped Hoth, and how Wes Jansen died. Wait a second, Wes Jansen didn't die? What is this? Well, this is the only piece that is truly and utterly non-canon, because there's almost no way to rectify this. If you want to include this in your timeline, then the only way to reconcile it is to take the patchwork that West End Games did, or whoever it was that did it, which is that, oh, Wedge is just telling a story. Like, so it is fan fiction within the universe, because it does not fit. So you either just skip it, or you say, oh, this is a story that Wedge is telling, but it's not true. Only way to rectify this issue. Star Wars Annual 3. Wait, why did 3? So we follow two characters, kind of the main characters. Of course, we got the main characters there too, but we have these new characters, which is Barney and Flint. And they really idolize the Rebel Alliance, and they show up, and they try to help them because the Empire shows up. However, Barney gets really injured. Flint thinks he's dead. Flint leaves, and he ends up joining the Empire, wanting revenge for all this. Meanwhile, Barney did not die, and he ends up joining the Rebel Alliance. So I thought that was a pretty, actually, decent issue. There's some fun action scenes in there too, so definitely a decent one. In issue 79, basically, Chewie and Lando learn about Han's location. So that way, because now we're setting up for Return of the Jedi. So now we're prepared for that, basically. Yeah. So I don't know if that's going to conflict with Shadows of the Empire, because I think they also find out where he's at in that book, but whatever. We've gotten basically done with In Between, at least in the Marvel Comics, episode 5 and 6. Now, this was a mixed bag for me. I don't feel that these stories were as fun as the stories right after episode 4. I felt like those were a lot of fun. And I don't know what the difference really is there. It wasn't that it wasn't fun. These past ones, they just weren't as engaging for some reason. Even though the art is, like, better and all that, and Lando's fun always. I was most invested in genuinely enjoying the Shira Bree arc, but everything else was either okay or just whatever. I know things pick up after episode 6. We have the Nagai War, we have Lumaya, but it just did not hit the same for me as previous issues in the old Marvel comics did, so. But that's pretty much it, guys. Up next, we have Shadows of the Empire by Steve Perry. Until then, guys, may the Force be with you.